I'm Max Hayward, and I'm a third-year Ph.D. student in the philosophy department here at Columbia, and I'm currently the Public Humanities Fellow for the program of Public Humanities Fellowships, which is organised in collaboration between the New York Council for the Humanities and the Heyman Center. So there's a general concept of the public humanities and the role that the humanities as a whole can play in the public sphere. I've always seen philosophy as a discipline that has great potential to be seen as relevant to the public. And this is because many philosophical questions really take off from issues and questions that are of universal and everyday relevance. So I began about a year ago, more, a year and a half ago, discussing the possibilities for a public humanities project with some of my colleagues within philosophy, since we felt frustrated that work that we did as in academic philosophy, which we felt had relevance outside of that sphere, we hadn't found a way to communicate that. One of my colleagues on the project discovered that there are several organizations within New York who run justice scholars programs. They work with recently incarcerated youth or youth on probation, and they involve them in educational and volunteering projects for about 6 months normally. We started partnering with the Harlem Justice Community Project, which is an offshoot of the Children's Village. We started off a group of 4 of us running a weekly discussion group with their justice scholars. Young, predominantly male, predominantly African American and Latino, mostly drawn from Harlem and the Bronx. The goal really is not to make this seem like a classic classroom model with a teacher-student dynamic. One of the big goals has been to think about ways of presenting philosophy in a way that steps outside that traditional dynamic. And the first thing that we do is that we never have anyone designated as a teacher or someone standing at the front of the classroom, except for very brief periods when someone may need to write something on a board. A group of us volunteers from Columbia Teachers College, we call ourselves facilitators, we facilitate the discussion, that's a term. We'll sit around the room in a circle with our participants. The fundamental thing that we want our participants to get out of their weekly meetings with us is a habit of presenting reasons for their opinions. We're always keen, and the first thing that we want to do is to elicit opinions, and many of these people have not had opportunities to present and express their views on topics that are of relevance to their own lives, such as the permissibility of stop and frisk or the nature of the prison system. But we think it's important that beyond simply expressing opinions, they should get into the habit of explaining why they have these opinions and why these opinions should be compelling to them and others. So every time someone says, for example, policemen shouldn't profile for stop and frisk, we always challenge them to explain why they think this. The second thing that we want people to get out of the meetings with us is a greater handle on some of the concepts that we see as really structuring the lives that they lead. So the concept of authority or of power or of obligation, the concept of equality or punishment. We feel that the more you understand concepts like this, the greater your ability to engage with and hopefully change, if change is what you effectively want, the systems that you engage with. And the third immediate goal that we want people to have is a habit of understanding the way that arguments and views work. So to be able to identify what are the assumptions and premises that a particular view that someone might put forward are, and to apply this to received opinions. So they might think it's obvious or be told that they ought to think it obvious that such and such a position is the right one to hold about, say, the nature of equality or the permissibility of punishment. And to learn to identify what are the key assumptions behind this and what's going unspoken. One of the great opportunities that's risen out of the collaboration with the New York Council for the Humanities is having access to their expertise in discussion facilitation. I first had a workshop with the other Public Humanities Fellows from the other universities that are participating in this when we had a training weekend at the start of our fellowship, when some of the experienced facilitators from the New York Council led a workshop explaining and imparting techniques and methods for facilitating a discussion in a way that didn't involve telling people what to think or pushing them towards one view or another, which was the first step in our moving away from a classic teacher-student or lecturing model to a more engaged, participant-focused style. So one of the very interesting things that I and the other facilitators on the project have noticed is how the work that we've done with court-involved youth in the Greater Harlem area has affected our teaching here in Columbia. We all teach undergraduate students. And one of the key skills that we've realized is absolutely central to the work that we do in Harlem is to make sure that we step away from the very intricate discussions that we are involved with as people writing dissertations and articles that are geared for academic journals, and to try and focus on the questions that are really significant in that work. What's fundamental in the work that we're doing? Why are these questions important? Why are we interested in them? I think the idea of philosophy as something that takes place in the public domain is a very ancient one. The conversations that Socrates had were with citizens of Athens about topics that, whilst many of them are the basis of philosophical questions of enduring significance within academic philosophy, were also seen as relevant to the people that he was talking to at the time. And I think it's a sad fact in contemporary philosophy that it's very much seen as something that happens within the walls of academia in a language that is inaccessible to many. And this is not true to the history of philosophy. Many of the great philosophers have been engaged with the public, have been public intellectuals. Many haven't even been within university settings. So I think that taking philosophical styles and methods of questioning, but making the connection with concerns that we all have explicit, and attempting to present these in a language that is accessible to those people as well, is really connecting with the history of philosophy in a way that is true to what philosophy has very frequently, and one might hope always, really been.